Aaron had always been a quiet kid. He wasn't the type to walk into a room and grab attention. In fact, most people barely noticed him when he entered. He usually kept his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly bent, and eyes lowered as if he didn't want to disturb anyone around him. But inside him lived a deep love for music, something that had been with him since he was little. He didn't grow up with many luxuries. His family didn't own an expensive piano or send him to big music schools. The small apartment they lived in had one old keyboard his uncle had given them years ago. The keys were a little stiff, and sometimes one or two didn't work at all. Still, Aaron treated it like treasure. Every night after finishing his homework, he would sit in front of it with excitement, pretending it was a grand piano in a big hall. He had dreamed of joining a music program for years, but he wasn't sure he was good enough. He had learned everything by watching online videos, listening carefully, and practicing until his fingers felt numb. Whenever he played, he felt peaceful, like the noise of the world faded away. Music was the one place where he didn't feel shy. But standing in front of real people? That was different. When he finally convinced himself to join the local program, he didn't tell anyone how nervous he was. He simply showed up one morning, with his backpack and a small notebook filled with music notes he had written himself. The building looked bigger than he had imagined. The glass doors reflected his anxious face as he took a deep breath and walked inside. The reception area was full of students around his age, all of them chatting loudly. Some carried polished instrument cases. Some wore fancy scarves and jackets. They looked confident, comfortable, and familiar with the place. Aaron felt like a stranger in a world he wasn't ready for. He quietly walked to a corner, sat down, and waited. He kept replaying a thought in his mind. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm not at their level. But before he could overthink too much, a staff member announced that all new students should go to the practice room for introductions. Aaron followed the group, trying to blend in. When they reached the room, he noticed the director standing at the front. The director looked firm but calm, someone who had been teaching for many years. His eyes scanned the group carefully. When his gaze passed over Aaron, it paused for a second as if noting how nervous he looked, but then moved on. No words were exchanged, but Aaron felt like the director could read right through him. The director began speaking in a clear, steady voice. He welcomed everyone, explained how the program worked, and mentioned that they would start with a simple round of introductions. He said each student should share their name and what instrument they played. Aaron felt his stomach twist. He didn't mind saying his name, but saying he played the piano, that made him worry. What if someone asked him to show his skill? What if they expected him to be amazing? What if he embarrassed himself in front of everyone? The introductions started from the left side of the room. One by one, the students spoke. Some had years of experience. Some mentioned winning competitions. Some talked about advanced techniques like it was nothing. Every time someone introduced themselves, a little piece of Aaron's confidence slipped away. When the person next to him finished speaking, Aaron knew it was his turn. His heartbeat felt loud enough that he wondered if others could hear it. He swallowed, took a small breath, and said softly, "My name is Aaron, and I play the piano." For a moment, everything was normal. But then a couple of students in the back chuckled quietly. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to reach Aaron's ears. One whispered something to the other, and both of them smiled in a way that didn't feel friendly. Aaron knew that smile. It was the kind people made when they didn't take you seriously. He looked down, wishing the moment would pass. The director didn't say anything about the laughter, maybe because he didn't hear it clearly. He simply nodded and continued to the next student. But for Aaron, that few seconds felt heavier than anything he had ever experienced in a classroom before. After the introductions, the group moved on to warm-up exercises. Each student went to an instrument station. The room filled with sounds, some loud, some soft, some messy, some beautiful. Aaron found an empty piano in the corner. It was nicer than anything he had ever played. The keys were smooth, the sound rich, and the stool adjustable. He sat down slowly, afraid to touch it at first. He placed his fingers gently on the keys, testing a soft chord. The sound echoed perfectly. He wanted to explore the instrument, but he felt like eyes were on him. He imagined people thinking he didn't belong. He imagined those earlier laughs repeating. The fear made his hands shake a little. Still, he tried. He played a simple scale he knew well, but even that didn't come out as smoothly as it did at home. His nerves made him press some keys too lightly and others too hard. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good either. A couple of students nearby glanced his way, exchanged looks, and then went back to their own instruments. Aaron kept his eyes on the piano, pretending not to notice anything around him. He reminded himself that he was here to learn, not to impress. But it still hurt that people judged him so fast. They didn't know how much he practiced. They didn't know how hard he worked. They only saw a shy boy who stumbled during warm dash-up. The director walked around the room, checking on everyone. When he reached Aaron's corner, he stopped for a moment. Aaron's fingers froze. The director watched quietly as Aaron played a short line. He didn't say anything harsh, but he didn't say anything encouraging either. He simply nodded and moved on. Aaron wasn't sure what that meant, but he hoped it wasn't bad. Deep inside, he carried a secret dream. At home, he had been practicing a difficult classical piece for months. It was something he'd chosen because it made him feel alive. The notes were complex, beautiful, and full of emotion. Whenever he played it alone, he felt like he understood something deeper about music. But he had never played it in front of anyone, not even his family, because he was scared of being judged. Now, standing in this room surrounded by confident students, that secret dream felt even more fragile. Still, Aaron refused to give up. He knew he wasn't the loudest person here. He wasn't the most experienced either. But he also knew one thing about himself. When he loved something, he worked hard for it. And he loved the piano more than anything. He just needed one chance. One moment to show that he wasn't what people assumed. But for now, he stayed quiet, kept practicing simple lines, and tried his best to ignore the whispers and small laughs that slipped through the room from time to time. No one knew what he was capable of. No one had seen the hours he spent practicing after midnight. No one knew about the masterpiece he was learning in secret. To them, he was just the shy newcomer, but as time would soon show, their first impression was far from the truth. The days after Aaron joined the music program felt heavier than he expected. Every time he walked into the room, he could feel the eyes of some students on him, watching, judging, sometimes smirking. He tried to ignore it, telling himself that he was here to learn, not to impress anyone. But the whispers and sideways glances made him feel small, like he didn't belong. Even though he loved music, he started wondering if he had made a mistake by coming. During group practice, Aaron stayed quiet. He followed instructions carefully, trying not to make mistakes. When the teacher asked the students to play together, he made sure he didn't rush or slow down. Yet, despite his careful efforts, he noticed some students whispering to each other, exchanging small laughs. One even leaned back and said something that made another giggle. Aaron didn't hear the words clearly, but the tone was enough. They thought he was inexperienced, weak, or clumsy. Aaron's chest tightened every time it happened. He hated that they judged him so quickly, without knowing how much he loved music or how much time he spent practicing. At home, he could play anything he wanted without judgment. But here, it felt like every note he played was measured, every movement observed. And in that silence, he began questioning himself. Maybe they were right. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Even though he felt this way, Aaron didn't give up. In fact, in the quiet of the practice room, away from the other students, he worked harder than ever. He pulled out the small notebook where he had written his own music. He carefully reviewed each note, each rhythm, making sure he understood every part. Then he played slowly, focusing on every sound, every movement of his fingers. When he finished, he would pause, think about what could be better, and play again. Hours could pass like this without him noticing. Sometimes, the older students left the room laughing, talking about other things. Some would glance at Aaron with a mix of curiosity and doubt, shaking their heads as if to say, "This kid will never be ready." But Aaron didn't care about their words. He cared only about the piano, the sound it made, and the feeling he got when he played something correctly. It was the only place he felt completely himself. One afternoon, the director assigned a group exercise. Each student was to perform a small piece while the others observed. Aaron's heart sank when he realized he would have to play in front of the group again. He felt nervous, remembering the laughs and the whispers from before. But he knew this was part of the journey. He had to face the challenge. When it was his turn, he slowly approached the piano. Some students whispered, "Here we go again," and a couple even rolled their eyes. Aaron felt the tension, but he closed his eyes for a moment, breathed deeply, and focused. He began to play a simple piece he had mastered, one he knew wouldn't fail him. But even in this short performance, a few small mistakes crept in. A key was pressed too softly here, another too quickly there. As he finished, the room was silent. Not the respectful silence of listening, but the awkward silence of surprise and doubt. A few students muttered something under their breath, but the director simply nodded and moved on. Aaron felt a mix of relief and disappointment. He hadn't made a big mistake, but he hadn't impressed anyone either. He wondered if they would ever see what he could truly do. That night, Aaron went home feeling tired but determined. He sat at his old keyboard in the small apartment and opened his notebook. The notes on the page weren't just letters and symbols. They were dreams, struggles, and emotions he had poured into the music. He started to play the difficult piece he had been secretly practicing for months. Unlike the pieces in the program, this one challenged every finger, every hand movement, every part of his focus. But when he played it correctly, he felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. He played late into the night, stopping only when his fingers ached. Then he would start again, correcting mistakes, practicing the same difficult parts over and over. Sometimes he recorded himself to see how he sounded. Sometimes he just listened in silence, imagining an audience that appreciated his work. This was the side of Aaron that no one at the music program had seen yet. The following week, the program announced that they would begin preparing for a midterm showcase. Each student was to select a piece to perform. Aaron felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. He knew the piece he had been practicing for months was difficult, much harder than what most students would choose. But he also knew it was the piece that truly represented his skill, his passion, and his love for music. At practice, some students laughed quietly when they heard what he planned to play. "That's way too hard for you," one whispered. Another shook their head. "You'll embarrass yourself." Aaron felt their words, but he didn't respond. He simply nodded, sat at the piano, and began practicing. He knew that the only opinion that mattered was his own and the director's. If he ever got the chance to perform, even the director seemed skeptical when Aaron mentioned the piece. He raised an eyebrow, glanced at Aaron, but didn't say much. Aaron took it as a challenge rather than a warning. He felt a small spark of excitement. This was his chance to prove that his quiet, shy exterior didn't define his talent. He had worked hard, and now it was time to let the music speak for itself. Every day, he came early and stayed late, practicing in the empty room. Some students still mocked him quietly, but he didn't care. He focused on each note, each rhythm, each pause. He imagined himself playing in a big hall, imagining the sound of applause, imagining people feeling what he felt inside. That vision kept him motivated even when the room was empty, even when no one believed in him. Slowly, the other students began to notice a change. He was no longer just the quiet kid who stumbled a little during warm-ups. His fingers moved faster and more confidently. His posture became straighter. Sometimes, a student would glance at him in surprise, seeing how focused he was, how serious he took his practice. But still, most of them didn't know what to expect. At home, he continued to practice for hours every evening. The apartment was small, the keyboard old, but he didn't mind. Music didn't need a fancy place. It needed dedication, and Aaron had plenty of that. He even stayed up late into the night, sometimes past midnight, replaying the hardest sections until his fingers ached and his mind felt exhausted. And every time he finally played the passage correctly, a small smile would appear on his face. That smile was a secret only he could see. He knew the day of the showcase would come soon. The thought made him nervous, but also excited. He had a plan, a dream, and a song that he had been perfecting for months. No one at the program had heard it yet, and that was what made it special. He was ready to show that the shy kid they underestimated had hidden depths they hadn't imagined. As the days passed, Aaron felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear of judgment still lingered, but it was slowly replaced by a quiet confidence. He wasn't playing to impress the students who laughed. He wasn't playing to gain approval from anyone. He was playing for himself, for the music, for the feeling that came when every note was perfect. By the time the showcase day was approaching, Aaron had transformed in small but meaningful ways. He walked a little taller. He smiled more easily. His eyes had a light of determination that hadn't been there before. The students who had once mocked him still whispered occasionally, but he ignored them. He knew what he had worked for, and no one's doubts could take that away. Inside, he felt ready. He knew that soon the quiet practice sessions, the late nights, and the long hours of effort would come together. And when they did, everyone would see that he was more than just the shy boy in the corner. No one at the program yet realized that Aaron was preparing for something that would change how they saw him forever. And Aaron, for the first time, truly believed in himself. The day of the showcase was slowly approaching, and Aaron could feel a mix of excitement and nervousness building inside him. Every morning he woke up thinking about it. Every night, before he went to sleep, he practiced the piece he had been preparing for months. It wasn't an easy piece, far from it. The notes were fast, tricky, and full of emotion, but that was exactly why he loved it. Each time he played it correctly, he felt a wave of joy, a rush that reminded him why he had started playing piano in the first place. At the music program, the atmosphere was different now. Students were busy practicing, some alone, some in small groups. The room was filled with sound, some beautiful, some rough, but Aaron didn't notice most of it. He was focused on his own preparation. A few students glanced at him from time to time, still skeptical, still unsure about the shy boy in the corner. Some whispered quietly, "He really thinks he can play that piece?" Or, "That's too much for him." Aaron overheard, but he didn't let it bother him. Their words couldn't reach the music inside him, the passion that drove his fingers to move in perfect rhythm. The director had asked everyone to pick their pieces for the showcase. Many students had chosen safe, familiar pieces, ones that they could play confidently and impress the director. But Aaron had chosen something completely different, a piece that required speed, precision, and emotional depth. He knew it would be challenging, and he knew some students might doubt him. But he also knew that it was the piece that could show the real him, the part of him that no one had seen before. During practice, he spent extra hours focusing on every difficult section. He slowed down when necessary, repeating the same measures again and again until his fingers moved naturally. Sometimes he played so fast that it felt like his hands couldn't keep up, but he pushed through, reminding himself that each mistake was just part of the learning process. His parents sometimes checked on him in the evening, worried that he was overworking himself. But when they saw the intensity in his eyes and the smile on his face after finishing a section perfectly, they knew he was doing exactly what he loved. In the classroom, a few students started to notice that something was changing. Aaron's hands were no longer hesitant when they touched the keys. He played with more confidence, more rhythm, and more control than before. Some of the students exchanged glances, whispering to each other. "Maybe he is better than we thought," one said quietly. But most still thought he was only lucky when he played well. They didn't know about the months of secret practice, the late nights, the dedication he had put in when no one was watching. Aaron, however, didn't care about proving himself to them. He cared about one thing, the music. Every note he played, every chord he struck, was a conversation between him and the piano. When he played, he didn't think about the students, the director, or the room. He only thought about the sound, the emotion, and the story the music told. This connection made his practice sessions feel alive. It wasn't work, it was living. One afternoon, the director called Aaron aside. He had heard about the piece Aaron was preparing and wanted to see a small part of it. Aaron felt his heart beat faster. He stood up, walked to the piano, and began to play a short section he had been perfecting. At first, his fingers moved cautiously, but soon they found their rhythm, hitting every note cleanly and confidently. The director listened silently, his eyes wide with interest. For the first time, Aaron felt like someone was seeing not just the shy boy, but the musician inside him. When he finished, The director nodded slowly, almost approvingly. He didn't say much, but the look on his face told Aaron something important. He had potential, more than anyone had given him credit for. Aaron smiled softly to himself. That small acknowledgement gave him confidence. It was the encouragement he needed to keep pushing forward. The days passed quickly as the showcase drew closer. Aaron continued practicing, fine-tuning every detail of the piece. He worked on timing, emotion, and expression. He imagined himself on the stage, playing in front of a real audience, and he imagined their reactions. He didn't imagine applause or praise, only the feeling that the music was being heard, truly heard. That thought kept him motivated even when his hands ached or when he felt tired. Meanwhile, some students began talking among themselves about Aaron's dedication. "Have you noticed how much he practices?" One whispered. Another nodded. "Yeah, he really doesn't mess around." Even the students who had mocked him before were starting to feel a little uncertain. Maybe he wasn't as inexperienced as they thought. Maybe there was more to him than just being quiet and shy. But no one really knew what to expect from him, yet at home, Aaron's routine stayed the same. After school, he would go to his small keyboard, play through the piece, make corrections, and try again. His family watched quietly, sometimes bringing him tea or a snack, careful not to disturb his focus. They knew this was more than just practice, it was something Aaron loved with all his heart. And as they listened, they sometimes felt a little amazed themselves, hearing the music he created with such care and emotion. One evening, Aaron decided to play the piece from start to finish without stopping. His fingers moved swiftly, his hands following the flow of the music naturally. The notes echoed through the small apartment, filling every corner. When he finished, he paused, letting the silence settle. He felt proud, not because he wanted recognition, but because he had achieved something on his own. He had worked hard, faced doubts, and still managed to play the piece perfectly from beginning to end. That sense of accomplishment made all the whispers, the laughs, and the judgment feel insignificant the final week before the showcase arrived. At the program, the students were nervous. Some practiced endlessly, trying to perfect every detail. Others were calm, confident that their pieces were safe and impressive. Aaron stayed focused on his own work, paying attention only to the piano and the music. He had prepared as much as he could. Now all that was left was to play in front of everyone. Even though he felt nervous, there was a new feeling inside him, confidence. He had spent months working quietly, putting his heart into the music. He knew he was ready. He had practiced more than most of the students could imagine, and he had played the piece perfectly many times when no one was watching. That preparation gave him strength. It gave him the courage to face the showcase, no matter what others thought. Some students still whispered when they saw him. "Do you really think he can play that piece?" One asked. Another laughed quietly. "He'll probably mess up." Aaron ignored them. Their opinions didn't matter. What mattered was the music inside him, the story he wanted to tell through the piano. He reminded himself that he didn't play for them. He played for himself, for the passion that had brought him to this point. The director called the students together for a final rehearsal before the showcase. Each student played their piece once in front of the group. Some performances were good, some had small mistakes, but all were solid. When it was Aaron's turn, the room went quiet. A few students exchanged looks, still skeptical. Some whispered under their breath, wondering if the shy boy could actually play such a difficult piece. Aaron felt a flutter of nerves, but he took a deep breath and sat at the piano. As his fingers touched the keys, he let himself focus completely on the music. He didn't think about the students, the director, or the room. He only thought about the sound, the emotion, and the story he wanted to tell. And as he played, something amazing happened. The music flowed naturally, perfectly, as if it had been waiting inside him all this time. Every note, every chord, every rhythm came alive. The room was silent, not because anyone was talking, but because everyone was listening. When he finished, a quiet stillness lingered in the room. The students who had doubted him stared, unsure how to react. The director's eyes widened slightly, a look of surprise and admiration on his face. For the first time, Aaron felt that he had truly shown a glimpse of what he could do. He didn't need applause or words of praise, he only needed to know that the music he loved had come alive. That day, Aaron realized something important. No matter what others thought, no matter how many whispers or laughs he had faced, he had worked hard, stayed focused, and believed in himself. And that belief, that quiet confidence, was stronger than any judgment or doubt. From that moment on, he felt a little different when he walked into the program. He wasn't just the shy boy in the corner anymore. He was someone who had a skill, a passion, and a story to tell through music. And though the showcase hadn't even begun yet, he knew that the journey he had started months ago was already changing the way he saw himself and the way others might see him too. The day of the showcase finally arrived. The sun rose early, casting a warm glow over the small music program building. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Students moved around carrying instruments, tuning them carefully, whispering last-minute advice to each other, and occasionally glancing nervously at the director. Some seemed calm, confident that their performances would go well, while others fidgeted, biting nails or pacing the room. Aaron, like everyone else, felt his heart beat faster. But unlike before, this nervousness was mixed with excitement and determination. He arrived early, carrying only his music notebook and a quiet sense of purpose. He walked through the hallways, noticing the polished instruments, the neatly arranged chairs, and the shiny piano waiting for him on the stage. For a moment, he paused, taking a deep breath. Memories of all the late-night practice sessions flashed before his eyes, the hours spent learning each note, repeating the hardest sections, imagining himself in front of an audience. All that preparation had led to this day. Some students glanced at him and smirked, whispering to each other. "Think he's ready for this?" One said. "He's probably going to mess up," another replied. Aaron heard the whispers, but he ignored them. He knew that he had done the work. He had practiced more than most of them could imagine, and he had prepared himself not just for the notes, but for the feeling of performing them perfectly. That knowledge gave him a quiet strength, one that no words or laughter could shake. The director began the showcase by welcoming the audience, which included parents, other students, and a few local music teachers. He explained that each student would have a turn to perform, and that everyone should be respectful and attentive. The room hushed as the first student walked onto the stage and began to play. Some pieces were soft and melodic, others fast and energetic. Applause followed each performance, polite but not overwhelming. When Aaron's turn approached, the room was tense, though most people hadn't yet noticed him as anything special. To them, he was still the quiet, shy boy who had joined months ago. Aaron waited in the wings, his hands lightly pressing against the edge of the piano, feeling the cool wood beneath his fingers. His stomach fluttered with nerves, but he focused on breathing slowly. He reminded himself that this was his moment to share something he loved. He wasn't here to prove anything to the students who doubted him. He wasn't here to impress the audience. He was here to let the music speak, to let all the hard work inside him finally come out. When his name was called, a few students whispered under their breath, some trying to hide smiles, others shaking their heads. Aaron walked onto the stage calmly, carrying himself with a quiet confidence he hadn't felt before. He sat at the piano, adjusted the stool, and let his hands hover over the keys. For a moment, everything felt still. The audience watched silently, some leaning forward in anticipation, some unsure of what to expect from the shy boy they had barely noticed. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Then he began to play. The first notes were soft, gentle, almost hesitant. But as he continued, his fingers moved with increasing confidence, gliding across the keys with precision and emotion. Each chord, each note, was filled with passion. It wasn't just music, it was a story. A story of long nights of practice, of moments of doubt, of determination, and of love for the piano. The audience leaned in, captivated by the sound. Even the students who had laughed at him before stopped their whispers. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Aaron's hands moved faster now, hitting every key with control and strength. The piece was complicated, full of difficult passages that required speed and accuracy, and he played them flawlessly. The audience could feel the emotion in every note, the soft, tender moments followed by dramatic, powerful sections. People exchanged glances, whispering in disbelief. The students who had doubted him before widened their eyes, their mouths slightly open, unable to hide their amazement. The director, standing quietly to the side, was completely still. He had seen many students perform over the years, but this performance left him surprised, almost speechless. For Aaron, it felt like he wasn't playing in front of an audience at all. He felt as if he was in a world of his own, where only the piano and he existed. He remembered all the nights he had spent practicing alone, imagining himself performing for people who would understand the music. Now that imaginary world was real, and he could feel the connection between himself and everyone listening. Every note he played seemed to reach them, as if they could feel the hours of dedication that had gone into this moment. When he reached the final section, the music became softer, almost whispering, before building to a dramatic conclusion. His fingers moved with elegance and power, hitting every note perfectly. Then, with a final, decisive chord, he ended the piece. The room was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The audience was frozen, caught in the beauty of what they had just witnessed. Even the students who had mocked him before couldn't find words. Their expressions were a mix of awe, surprise, and respect. Aaron slowly lifted his hands from the keys and exhaled deeply. He opened his eyes and looked at the audience. He saw the astonished faces of the students, the quiet admiration of the teachers, and the slight smile on the director's face. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen, not as a shy boy, not as a student who might fail, but as a musician who had worked hard and shared something real with the world. Applause erupted, breaking the silence. It started quietly, then grew louder as more people clapped, cheering, and whistling. The students who had doubted him before joined in, though some still seemed a little stunned. The director stepped forward and nodded, a look of pride on his face. He told Aaron that the performance was extraordinary and that he had shown talent and dedication beyond what anyone had expected. Aaron smiled quietly, feeling a warmth in his chest. He had done it. He had turned months of practice, patience, and quiet determination into something tangible, something beautiful that everyone could experience. After the performance, Aaron stepped off the stage. Some students came up to him, shaking his hand, complimenting him, or simply saying, "Wow, I didn't know you could play like that." The whispers of doubt were gone, replaced by respect. People began to understand that the shy boy in the corner had hidden depths and abilities that no one had imagined. Aaron didn't boast or act differently. He simply nodded, letting the music speak for him that day. Something changed not only in how others saw him, but in how he saw himself. He realized that the shy boy they had underestimated was capable of greatness, capable of expressing feelings and stories through music. He learned that hard work, patience, and self-belief could overcome doubt, laughter, and judgment. And most importantly, he understood that success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about staying true to yourself and your passion. No matter what anyone else thought. As the showcase continued, Aaron felt a quiet satisfaction. Other students performed, some well, some less impressive, but his mind was at peace. He had faced the moment he had been working for, and he had delivered. He had shown the world what dedication and love for music could accomplish. And though the applause, the smiles, and the nods of admiration were wonderful, what mattered most was the sense of fulfillment inside him. He had achieved something that no one could take away. He had proven to himself that he was capable of greatness. And that feeling was more powerful than any recognition from others. That evening, as he walked home, Aaron thought about the journey that had brought him here, the quiet nights of practice, the whispered doubts from classmates, the small victories and frustrations along the way. He realized that every challenge had shaped him, every mistake had taught him, and every moment of determination had led to this day. And as he walked through the streets, carrying the memory of the applause and the music in his mind, he smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with passion, dedication, and endless possibilities. After the showcase, the room was buzzing with conversation. People were talking about the performances they had seen, comparing pieces, complimenting students, and sharing their impressions. Aaron, however, stayed quietly near the back, still catching his breath from the intensity of his performance. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a calm, satisfied feeling. He had done it. He had faced the moment he had been preparing for, and he had played the piece he loved with everything he had. Slowly, people began to notice him. The students who had once whispered and laughed at him were now looking at him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. They didn't know what to say. Some came forward, hesitating, and finally asked, "How long have you been practicing that piece?" Others simply nodded, impressed, without saying a word. For weeks, Aaron had been invisible in their eyes. Now he had their full attention, not because he tried to grab it, but because he had done what he loved, honestly and passionately. The director approached Aaron, his expression serious but full of admiration. He put a hand gently on Aaron's shoulder and said, "I want you to know that what you did today was extraordinary. You played with skill, emotion, and courage that I rarely see. You have a gift, and you should never doubt it again." Aaron felt his heart swell. These were not empty words. The director had seen countless students perform, and his praise meant something. For the first time, Aaron realized that someone with experience and authority truly recognized his dedication and talent. After the official showcase ended, Aaron's fellow students gathered around. Some wanted tips on how he practiced, others asked him to show small parts of the piece. Even those who had doubted him before were curious now. A few laughed awkwardly, saying, "I guess I underestimated you." Aaron smiled politely. He didn't feel proud in a boastful way. Instead, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He knew that the months of hard work, long nights, and silent dedication had made this moment possible. And that feeling was worth more than anyone's approval. At home that evening, Aaron sat at his old keyboard and reflected on everything that had happened. He thought about the first day he had joined the music program, the nervousness, the whispers, the students who had mocked him. He remembered how small and invisible he had felt, uncertain if he belonged. And now he could see how far he had come. He had turned doubt into determination, fear into courage, and secret practice into a performance that left people speechless. Aaron realized that the journey was not just about playing music well. It was about believing in himself, even when no one else did. It was about staying focused on what mattered, ignoring distractions, and trusting his own abilities. For months, he had faced skepticism, laughter, and doubt. And through it all, he had stayed true to his passion. That lesson, he understood now, was even more important than the applause or recognition. The next day at the program, the change in Aaron was noticeable. Students who had once ignored him now greeted him respectfully. Some asked for advice on practicing, others simply nodded when he walked by, acknowledging him in a way they hadn't before. Even the students who had mocked him were careful around him now. It wasn't arrogance that had changed how they saw him. It was the undeniable proof of his skill and dedication. Aaron didn't let the attention change him. He continued practicing as he always had, quietly and focused. He knew that real improvement came from consistency, not praise. He still made mistakes, still worked late into the evenings, still pushed himself to do better. But now he did it with confidence, knowing that his efforts could lead to something meaningful, not just for himself, but for anyone who would listen to his music. The director, impressed by Aaron's performance, asked him to play in a small regional competition. Aaron was nervous at first, but he remembered all the months of preparation and courage he had already shown. He agreed. The regional stage was larger, the audience unfamiliar, and the pressure even greater. Yet Aaron felt ready. He had learned that preparation, focus, and passion could overcome fear and doubt. No matter what happened, he knew he could give his best. As the weeks passed, Aaron's confidence grew. He began to share more of his music with the other students, offering tips and encouragement. He realized that helping others improved his own understanding, and it built friendships he hadn't expected to have. People started to respect him not just for his talent, but for his dedication, humility, and willingness to support others. The shy boy, who had once been ignored, had quietly become someone others admired and looked up to. At home, Aaron's family noticed the change too. He smiled more easily, spoke more confidently about his dreams, and carried himself with a quiet pride. They had always known he was talented, but now everyone else could see it too. Yet, what mattered most to Aaron wasn't the recognition, it was the feeling of accomplishment, the joy of creating music that moved people, and the understanding that hard work and belief in oneself could turn impossible dreams into reality. Months later, the regional competition arrived. Aaron performed on a stage much bigger than the program's showcase. The audience was larger, the lights brighter, and the pressure immense. But Aaron felt calm. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play the piece he had been perfecting for months. Every note, every chord, every rhythm flowed naturally. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the music. And when he finished, the applause was overwhelming. Yet again, Aaron felt the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing he had given his best, stayed true to himself, and shared something meaningful with the world after the performance. The director came up to him, smiling. "You've grown so much since the first day you joined this program. Your dedication, talent, and heart have made all the difference. I couldn't be prouder." Aaron smiled in return, feeling grateful. Not just for the recognition, but for the journey, the lessons, and the courage he had discovered within himself. Aaron's story quickly became known among the students and teachers. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, that quiet people often carry immense talent and passion, and that dedication could overcome doubt and ridicule. He became an example for others who felt unnoticed or underestimated, showing them that belief in oneself and consistent effort could lead to remarkable results. Even as his fame within the program grew, Aaron remained humble. He continued practicing, continued learning, and continued sharing his music with those willing to listen. He never forgot the moments of doubt, the whispers, or the laughter he had faced. Those memories reminded him of how far he had come, and how much determination and courage could change a person's life. Looking back, Aaron realized that the journey had taught him more than just how to play a piano piece perfectly. It had taught him about perseverance, self-belief, patience, and humility. It had shown him that success wasn't just about talent, but about heart, dedication, and the courage to keep going even when no one believed in you. He had learned that being quiet didn't mean being weak, and that passion, when nurtured, could speak louder than any words or judgment. In the end, Aaron's performance wasn't just a triumph on the piano. It was a triumph of spirit. It was a message to anyone who had ever felt underestimated or overlooked. Keep working, keep believing, and stay true to your passion. The world may doubt you, others may laugh or ignore you, but the dedication you carry within yourself can create something extraordinary. And when the time comes, your moment will arrive, and those who once doubted you will see the truth of your talent and heart. Aaron's journey didn't end with that showcase or even with the regional competition. It continued with each practice, each performance, and each new piece he tackled. But that first moment when the piano rang out in front of the audience and left everyone silent remained unforgettable. It reminded him of what was possible when passion, courage, and perseverance met opportunity. And it became the foundation for a life shaped not by doubt or ridicule, but by dedication, love for music, and unwavering belief in himself. Aaron had started as a quiet, shy boy, underestimated by everyone around him. By staying true to his passion, working tirelessly, and believing in himself, he transformed into someone respected, admired, and recognized not for being loud or confident, but for being real, dedicated, and extraordinary in his craft. And that was a victory that would last a lifetime.